Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about all of the subclasses and doing some comparisons, talking about builds, all that good stuff. This is the PvE comparison video, not going to be talking about PvP at all. This video is just basically a mash of every thought that I've had about all of the subclasses that I haven't put into a video already, or just kind of more refined thoughts from the alpha and the beta, so I apologize if I'm all over the place. Please also keep in mind that the weight of the classes within Destiny are not nearly as weighted as classes that you'd see in an MMO. MMO classes define your entire experience most of the time. It won't define nearly as much as in Destiny. Gonna talk about the Voidwalker, Striker, and Gunslinger a little bit first. Not too much detail since I've talked about them a lot in the past. Everyone has experience with them. Right now, Gunslinger is the weakest PvE class of these three subclasses, and I'd actually argue that it is the weakest PvE class in general. Golden Gun is a pretty weak skill compared to the potential of Fist of Havoc and Nova Bomb, which would be weird considering Golden Gun is so strong in PvP. The reason is obviously because of the amount of enemies. 3 enemies in PvP is half or possibly the entire team. 3 enemies in PvE is absolutely nothing. The damage on Golden Gun is a little bit too low as well. If you attack anything with a shield and it's not a solar shield, it might take all 3 shots to take down that one enemy. Fist of Havoc and Nova Bomb have the potential to take down way more enemies at once, not to mention providing crowd control via zoning with Aftermath Fist of Havoc and Vortex Nova Bomb. I've heard a lot of people say, well, good luck hitting Sepix Prime with Fist of Havoc and, stuff like that. The damage from Golden Gun isn't really enough to convince me to care about bringing a Hunter over a Warlock or a Titan for everything before that. The Gunslinger needs some damage buffs. The Hunter's Grenade is also not amazing, the damage over time component is pretty weak, and compared to the Flashbang, which provides a very lengthy crowd control, and the Vortex Grenade, which provides zoning and incredibly high damage, it's weak. Even their melee is weaker, it has the potential to miss, and it doesn't provide nearly as good bonuses as the other 2 classes. The Hunter's passive bonuses are pretty good though. Gunslinger's Trance and Chain of Woe are really solid for making your gun damage more efficient, and they're really the only talents in Destiny that really do anything with gun-related bonuses. So a build I would use for the Gunslinger for PvE would be something like Trip Mine Grenade, provided that you could set it up beforehand to maximize your damage, whatever movement that you want, Gunfighter Golden Gun, Incendiary Blade, Path Unknown, Gunslinger's Trance if I'm not using a Scout Rifle, otherwise Scavenger, Way of the Drifter, and Chain of Woe. I don't really see too much of a variation possible with a PvE build. Maybe I'm underrating Keyhole a bit, but it just seems a little too situational to me. I'd use that exact build for solo, except swap out Trip Mine Grenade for Incendiary. Striker versus Voidwalker is a tough comparison because the classes are really different. They both seem like damage classes, but I'd argue that Striker is much more of a support-based class compared to the Voidwalker. Striker just does a lot of its support via the use of damage. Striker brings excellent crowd control and is probably the supportiest subclass of the 3. Their Flashbang Grenade is incredibly good, stunning for enemies for a pretty long time, and with a disciplined build, you can toss out a Flashbang every 20 seconds. Their super obliterates most enemies and can shove them back from your teammates, and with Aftermath can leave a really big zoning field for even more crowd control. Their melee is alright, Illuminated Stormfist can just have your super come around a lot faster. I will say that the Titan's passive bonuses are not the best in the world. They're very defensive focused, Shoulder Charge and Aftershocks are really the only offensive focused passives. There's nothing wrong with defensive passive abilities, but they're just not as good as the other classes based on the Titan's supportiness. A group Striker build I'd roll with is Flashbang Grenade, Increased Height, Aftermath Fist of Havoc for zoning, Illuminated Stormfist, Titan Codex 1 and 4, Headstrong or Transfusion, and Juggernaut. A solo build would probably swap Aftermath for Death from Above, Transfusion, and Shoulder Charge. When I say group build, this is under the assumption that you're doing a strike or a raid or some sort of difficult content, which is why I play it a bit safer. If you're just screwing around in explore mode, then either build is fine. Voidwalker, on the other hand, is pure damage. Vortex Grenade and Nova Bomb are big damage and have a lot of zoning potential, with Soul Ripped Energy Drain boosting your Nova Bomb usage even more. Capping your strength is actually a pretty decent idea on the Warlock due to how Energy Drain works, which if you didn't know, whenever you kill an enemy with your Energy Drain melee attack, you drastically increase the rate at which your grenade comes back. However, capping both stats is going to be very important, probably the most important on the Warlock. Strength doesn't matter as much for the Titan or the Hunter, but brings big benefits for the Warlock. I'd actually encourage the testing of a pure energy drain build, which would grab the Hunger and Embrace the Void. The core build for a Voidwalker I think would be Vortex Grenade, whatever movement you want, Soul Rip Energy Drain, Arcane Spirit, and Divine Order. Your super depends on your passives. If you go Vortex Mastery, you get Vortex Nova Bomb, end of story. If you get Shattered Nova Bomb, then Vortex Mastery is worth way less, so I'd recommend a pure energy drain build, so that's the Hunger and Embrace the Void. Axion Bolt, the other grenade, the verdict is still out on that right now. Vortex Grenade is so potent, and we haven't really seen damage numbers on Axion Bolt yet. Either build is going to be good for solo or group play. So what about the new subclasses, Sunsinger, Defender, and Bladedancer? Well, toss Defender into its own category for now. Once again, it is a support-based role. Turns out Titan ended up being the more support-based class. Striker has a lot of support capabilities, and Defender is even more focused on support, although not as much crowd control. Sunsinger, previously believed to be a support-based subclass, is actually a pretty high-powered damage subclass. That being said, it definitely can play a support-based role. Let's try to do some comparing now. We'll put the elements aside for now, pretend that no subclass deals elemental damage, everything just deals normal damage. We'll start with Defender versus Striker. Both have immense support capability. The Defender Titan will be a staple in most, if not all, raid compositions. Ward of Dawn will be very good for raids, especially given how many people it can buff. Striker Titan will also be highly valued for raids because of Flashbang Grenade. If you get to the Discipline cap, your grenade will be on a 20-second cooldown. I mentioned that earlier. That's around 4 to 5 seconds of crowd control every 20 seconds. That's insane. That's 20 to 25% uptime on crowd control, and in a pretty large radius at that. As long as the fringe of your grenade touches an enemy, they'll be blinded for the full duration, and it works on a lot of enemies. That being said, in smaller environments, I would take the Striker. The crowd control component is going to be way more valuable in smaller environments compared to buffs. The Striker Titan provides its support through crowd control and its damage, where the Defender provides its support through the use of buffs and shields. The thing that kind of stinks about the Striker is that their talents don't do a lot to add to their PvE kit. The only thing that really does is Aftershocks, but if you don't get Aftermath as your super talent, it's pointless to get. Striker's passives really just make Fist of Havoc easier to use. They don't really buff damage or add to your support capabilities, they just make you tankier as a player. I'm making that out to sound like a bad thing, it's not. But when I see stuff like Embrace the Void, Gunslinger's Trance, Encore, Touch of Flame, Illuminated, Untouchable, Bastion, the Striker doesn't have that talent, you know? That talent that makes it the icing on the cake, that talent that makes something really pop, or really makes something connect all the dots. What about Voidwalker versus Sunsinger? Both are excellent damage classes. A Song of Flame Sunsinger is going to be very important to a raid group. As important as a Defender Titan? I'd argue yes and no, and that really depends on your group composition. If you have a bunch of Strikers and Voidwalkers, that's a lot of crowd control. If you have a lot of Gunslingers, it's not as valuable. If I could only pick one, I'd get a Defender Titan over a Sunsinger because the Defender is way more consistent. So what about their damage now that I'm done distracting myself? Well, we're going to need to see the potency of something like a Viking Funeral build, which would take Viking Funeral and Touch of Flame. I would love to get both Touch of Flame and Gift of the Sun at the same time. Hopefully we'll be able to do that via some sort of gear configuration. Gunslinger's damage over time component on their Incendiary Grenade is kind of weak right now, so I'm hoping to see more out of damage over time in Destiny in general, especially with a build like this, which is really going to depend on that damage over time component. Voidwalker, on the other hand, with a full energy drain build, has the potential to pump out so many grenades, and we all know how Nova Bomb will actually work. I think these two classes will be pretty similar in terms of potential damage output, but I'll give a slight edge to Voidwalker. Bladedancer versus Gunslinger. I was initially very skeptical about Bladedancer. Gunslinger didn't impress me that much in the damage department, and knowing how badly you can get punished for being in melee range against certain enemies, I thought Bladedancer was going to be crap. Now that we've seen a couple of more clips, although very short, it totally changed my opinion. I see Bladedancer being quite good in the burst damage department, sort of like how I think Gunslinger should be performing. The combination of Blink to Blink Strike to Arc Blade to Blink Out will be very potent for wave clearing. Add in Encore, and you can have Arc Blade go for a pretty long time. Right now I think Bladedancer will have much higher potential damage output of the two, and I think Bladedancer is the subclass with the most potential burst damage. Consistent damage is always going to be important, but the benefits of burst damage are also very important. There's the burst damage of the Sunsinger Warlock when they use Radiance with abilities, but we don't know if Radiance increases weapon damage as well, or just your abilities. There's the burst damage of the Striker and the Voidwalker, but after the use of their super, you're pretty much done burst-wise. The reason Bladedancer has the most potential burst is because not only can it provide the burst of a Fist of Havoc or a Nova Bomb, but because it has the potential to sustain that damage for a very long time. Talents like Unstoppable and Headstrong just make Fist of Havoc easier to use. Stuff like Angry Magic and Bent Gravity just make Nova Bomb easier to use. That definitely has the potential to add damage through accuracy, sure. But something like Encore, which increases the duration you can use Arc Blade, is true effective potential damage. The benefits of this burst means that you can leave the Bladedancer to their own devices to maybe kill waves of adds during an engagement instead of needing multiple people. Alright, so what about some other comparisons? Striker versus Bladedancer, Defender versus Voidwalker, and Gunslinger versus Sunsinger. Let's get the elements involved now. Striker versus Bladedancer, much like Defender versus Voidwalker, all depends on your current team composition. You're going to bring a Bladedancer for the damage, and you're going to bring a Striker for the support. Defender versus Voidwalker cannot be compared. They are very different. It would be like comparing a tank to a healer. They just do different things very well. Gunslinger versus Sunsinger, I'd take Sunsinger because of the issues I mentioned with the Gunslinger previously. The only things the Gunslinger can really bring are damage boosts for themselves, and their super is pretty weak compared to other supers. Anyway, that's going to be enough talking from me. If you want to talk any more comparisons, maybe want me to touch on anything a little bit more, drop a note in the comments and I'll see what I can do for you. A positive rating is always nice if you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.